So you hear a politician saying something completely crazy and you think, well, no way that's ever going to happen. Well, why can they still be saying it? Let's dive in. So anchoring is a topic that's covered in behavioral economics. And typically when we think about anchoring, we think about how, let's say, telling someone a certain number with respect to the height of a certain building, and then afterwards taking the responses of guessing how high that building actually is. And research has shown that the number that was kind of flown around at first will have an impact on people's responses afterwards. I won't get into that side of things in this video. I want to get into anchoring with respect to negotiations. So sometimes you might hear someone say something completely crazy, like we're going to do this and we're going to take over your country, or we're going to do something else. And you think this doesn't make sense. This is never going to happen. But as a person says it in a confident way and repeats it, the idea that this does is that this becomes kind of normal. And as that situation becomes more normal, and it's a very bad situation, let's just put it that way, it means that something that's still a bad situation for you, but not nearly as bad, seems okay. So let's say your goal as a politician is for this other country to accept a trade deal that leads to, 10% tariffs on all other goods. You can start by saying that you're going to introduce a 50% tariff. And you keep on pushing this idea over and over and over again. And over time, people are like, this would be so disastrous, that in the end, when you say, okay, you've helped out, like I was going to impose this tariff based on the fentanyl problem at the border, which doesn't really exist between Canada and the US, but that's just how they make it seem. And in the end, you've done well, so we're just going to lower that tariff down to 10%. Well, because that 50% number was flown around for a while, 10% doesn't seem that bad. 10% we could live with. So by making this story showing something that's way worse and then working your way back to something that's less bad, it makes it seem not as bad as if you had started right away with 10%. People would be like, no, we don't want to pay 10%. But because you saw something worse, it actually seems not that bad. Same thing as if you're kind of bidding on a price for a certain good and you're saying like, I normally charge my clients $30,000, and you're like, that's preposterous, that's way too much. And then later on you say, well, if I cut this in this service, like I can get around, like you're a good guy, I'd like to work with you, I'll only charge you $10,000. Well, all of a sudden, because in your mind you're like, well, 30,000 is his number, dropping it to 10,000 actually looks like a really good price. But in the end, probably 5,000 might be the going price for this kind of service, but you kind of made it seem to be worth a lot more than it should be. It doesn't always work, but there is certain context that you can use anchoring, throwing a different idea and that's more extreme at first, and you're working your way back and succeeding at getting more out of this story than if you had started with a reasonable number. So keep that in mind in negotiations in business, even in relationships. There's always a way to play around with expectations by just floating this random expectation that's a little bit crazy so that people kind of think that this can actually happen. And then when you go back towards a more realistic but favorable for you outcome, people might actually accept it. Not always the best way of going about doing things, but it's just one of those strategies out there, and it's one of the strategies that Donald Trump uses a lot, this anchoring strategy. I'll catch you guys on the next one. If you found this video interesting, please consider subscribing or joining my class where I guide you to apply and expand on the information found in these videos to real-life examples. Have a good day.